Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Today we continue our evolution series where we look at different types of technologies, factions, even planets, and talk about how they evolved through Star Wars history. Recently we covered the evolution of Coruscant as well as the Mandalorians. Today we'll be looking at perhaps one of the most important technologies in all of Star Wars, the blaster.
You know how to use one of those?
Yeah, you pull the trigger.
A little bit more to it than that. You got a lot to learn.
We'll break down the evolution of the Star Wars blaster by looking at 10 unique designs. But first, a little background on how the blaster works. Contrary to popular belief, a blaster is not a laser. Laser is actually an acronym that stands for Light Amplification by Stimulated Emission of Radiation. Laser weapons use a high energy beam which needs to be kept on target and does more damage as time passes by. Our own Navy has begun testing a laser weapon system which is capable of disabling unmanned drones and the engines on small attack boats. The idea was to create a cheap and reliable replacement for more conventional and expensive guided munitions. And it kind of worked. The Navy's law system probably cost thousands of times cheaper per shot when compared to your more standard guided munitions. But in order to sustain such high amounts of energy, there also needs to be a pretty significant power source, making lasers not necessarily the best choice for handheld weapons. In the Star Wars universe, just like the Star Trek universe, lasers are considered archaic weapons when compared to other types of weapons.
They are now locking lasers on us.
Lasers?
Yes, sir.
Lasers can't even penetrate our navigation shields, don't they know that?
As a matter of fact, even more primitive firearms known as slug throwers had outlived the laser in Star Wars. Instead, most people use blasters which fire out particle bolts. A blaster usually has a gas cartridge and a power pack. Every time the trigger was pulled, a small amount of gas was released and then energized into a particle beam, which was then focused with a prism into a super condensed bolt. These weapons were also extremely effective. The gas cartridges could hold hundreds of shots in them. As a matter of fact, the weapons oftentimes overheated way before they ran out of gas. Some weapons even had heat sinks that could pop open. Alright, so now that we know the basics of how blasters work, let's go into the evolution. The earliest mention of blasters in Star Wars comes in Legends. An ancient droid was discovered in a star map temple on Tatooine in 3965 BBY by a former Jedi and Sith known as Revan. Upon closer inspection, it was found out that the droid had been built around 25,000 years earlier during the Rakatan Empire. The Rakatans were elevated by an ancient species known as the Qua. They were responsible for creating some of the most important technologies in the galaxy, including the hyperdrive and lightsaber. The Rakatan Guardian droid was just another piece of technology they had built and could be found protecting different ancient Rakatan structures across the galaxy tens of thousands of years after the Infinite Empire had collapsed. One of these droids had been left at the Star Temple of Tatooine in case a Rakatan ever came to look for the Star Forge. The Star Forge was basically a super weapon that functioned as an infinite factory. It would soak up the energy from a star and then basically mass produce anything you wanted it to. Star destroyers, vehicles, weapons, even iPhones. With this super weapon, the Sith were able to build a gigantic fleet out of thin air and take over most of the Republic. So it makes sense the Rakatan Guardian droids were also used to protect that facility. They are armed with carbonite projectors, blasters, and also flamethrowers. Even though the blaster was over 25,000 years old when it was found by Revan, it was still considered quite powerful and technologically advanced at the time. Now, to continue forward, we must first go backwards. A mysterious plague severed the Rakatans' connection with the Force, and within a few generations, their infinite empire had completely crumbled and fallen apart. The slave races, mainly the humans, were able to reverse engineer the Rakatan blaster technology. They were able to make gigantic energy conductors and generators. These early blasters were gigantic and were mainly used as heavy artillery weapons. They weren't all that mobile and consumed massive amounts of energy, were slow to fire, and also quite dangerous to the operators inside. Eventually, they were able to miniaturize a lot of the components in their gigantic blaster turrets, creating something known as the beam tube. Thanks to more efficient and smaller energy sources, these energy weapons could now be powered by small backpack generators, which fed power to the actual tube or blaster assembly. So once again, we begin seeing infantry carry blasters on the battlefield. Zim Despot's elite forces were known to carry these weapons. This is an early Old Republic era blueprint of the Emperor 4 beam tube, along with the backpack unit that came with it. The backpack was around 30 kilos, and the blaster itself was around 15 kilos, which is ridiculously heavy for a standard infantry weapon. It wasn't really, say, something you could hide underneath the table and shoot someone in the crotch with.
Yes, I bet you have.
For reference, a M250 caliber machine gun without its tripod is around 40 kilos, which is 5 kilos less than the whole beam tube package. The beam tube could also only fire 100 shots per power pack at a pretty slow rate and had a maximum range of only 50 meters and an optimum range of only 20 meters. So while beam tubes were relatively deadly at very close ranges and extrememly demoralizing to individuals who had no idea what they were, they still weren't all that practical and far too expensive to equip regular infantry with. That's why slug throwers were still quite popular during this time period. However, the beam tube would replace other weapons because of their smaller, more efficient size and better projectile. It would eventually displace heat beams, which were basically the equivalent of lasers in our own world. Beam tubes would also go on to replace plasma cannons because they were just safer and didn't have a tendency to blow up like plasma cannons did. Eventually, the beam tube would evolve into what's known as a pulse wave blaster. No longer requiring a large generator, these weapons were much more mobile and concealable. Around 7,811 BBY, the Republic encountered the world of Wayman-C. Their technologically superior forces were equipped with pulse wave blaster weapons. The Wayman-C natives had much more powerful energy sources and energy generators, which meant that their weapons had higher firing rates and more powerful shots. They were able to overwhelm the much larger Republic forces with their superior weapons. It wasn't until the Republic scientists were able to reverse engineer the power generators and blasters that the Republic was able to turn the tide. The pulse wave blaster would not only change handheld technology, it would also lead to the invention of rapid-fire turbo lasers, which would become standard on all old Republic ships. One of the biggest differences between pulse wave blasters and regular blasters was that it created a spatial distortion in front of the barrel, making it incredibly dangerous at close ranges. This is why old pulse wave blaster weapons are technically illegal, because they are classified as disruptor-style weapons in the modern Republic era. The pulse wave blaster still had a relatively short range. When the energy bolt left the barrel, the longer it traveled, the more it dissipated. Blaster technology would sort of plateau for the next few thousands of years, and only minor incremental changes were created. This is when someone got the bright idea of strapping multiple blasters together with the same targeting system, which significantly increased the fire rate. These were relatively cumbersome and unreliable weapons, but they were used in some circumstances. The triple blaster design actually did find some use in starfighters as well. As a matter of fact, the earliest version of the Z-95 Headhunter was mounted with a triple blaster. By 4000 BBY during the Great Sith War, the pulse wave blaster was beginning to show its age and was starting to get replaced by the conventional blaster. These were defined as weapons that needed no additional equipment or generators to fire bolts. The blasters we see during the Mandalorian Wars were more or less the same in design principle as the blasters during the Clone Wars period. Blasters became more accurate, had better firing rates and range, and would begin to replace slug throwers in most conventional militaries. Compared to slug throwers, blaster ammunition in the form of power packs and gas cartridges were actually much lighter. Now, one disadvantage the blaster had when compared to a slug thrower was its lack of stealth options. Blaster bolts were superheated particles that were easily visible, like tracer rounds. Also, blasters couldn't be silenced like slug throwers could. But during the Clone Wars, Blastech was able to invent the DC-19 stealth carbine. This was based off the DC-15 blaster rifle widely used by GAR forces at the time. The modified DC-19 had a suppressor unit attached on it that could mute any firing sounds. It also could use a special refined Tabana gas which produced invisible bolts. The special type of cartridges were extremely expensive and also provided an immense amount of heat in the weapon, further reducing firing rates. It was mainly used by clone shadow troopers and allowed them to fire without giving away their position. As energy generators became more efficient, the blasters were once again paired with backpack generators like the ancient beam tubes. This time, these blasters were called autocannons, and they could produce an incredible amount of firepower and destruction. These autocannons range from lighter single-man operated weapons to larger tripod-deployed squad autocannons. These weapons usually had massive heat sinks and also lacked precision, and were used more as area suppression weapons rather than precision weapons. There is one thing that the Empire, Rebel Alliance, New Republic, Old Republic all agreed on, and that was disruptors were extremely messed up weapons. That's why all these factions made them illegal. Disruptors had a nasty reputation because they were extremely powerful, capable of taking out an armored vehicle in one shot, piercing the hull of a starship, and completely disintegrating organic targets, making crime scene analysis incredibly difficult. These weapons were famously and illegally used by Imperial forces against the Lasat on their homeworld. What made the Disruptors so powerful was the fact that it used a massive overloaded amount of Tabana gas per every shot. The amplification process of the particle was also different from the standard blaster and created a much more chaotic, shorter range bolt that had a significantly higher energy output. Now, the exact opposite of the Disruptor would be the Sting Beam. It was designed to be small and concealable. It usually could fit in the palm of one's hand and was deadly at close quarters, but had an extremely short range and limited amount of shots. If shot at someone at a longer range, it could usually stun them. Instead of having a barrel, these weapons had antennas. Lando Calrissian favored such weapons at the Sabacc table. So there you have it, that is the evolution of the Star Wars blaster. And as you can see, it took quite a while for the technology to mature and eventually replace the slug thrower. Don't forget to check out the rest of our evolution series. We'll link it down in the description below in this playlist. Also, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.